We're following two major stories. Former President Donald Trump took the witness stand today in his civil defamation trial brought by E. Jean Carroll. We'll get to that in a moment. But first, we begin on Capitol Hill. Divisions among Senate Republicans are threatening to derail the ongoing border policy negotiations with the Biden White House. It caps off a week in which former President Trump racked up more congressional endorsements after his New Hampshire primary win. The former president has railed against the negotiations on social media. Margaret Brennan and Scott MacFarlane join us now. Margaret is CBS News' chief foreign affairs correspondent and moderator of Face the Nation. Scott is a CBS News congressional correspondent. Scott, quickly, where exactly do the negotiations stand?
With leaders in the Senate and the negotiators themselves telling us the talks are still alive. Based on our reporting late this afternoon, Bob, it's quite clear these negotiations, these high-stakes negotiations tying border security in Ukraine, are wobbly, and that Donald Trump is positioned, if he chooses to cut the legs out from beneath these wobbly talks. We spoke with Lindsey Graham, senator from South Carolina, a Donald Trump ally. We asked him where things are headed. He's still bullish on the prospects of getting this done. Take a listen to what else he had to add.
Donald Trump have the ability to kill this immigration deal?
Well, I think there's not a deal to be killed yet. To those who don't like it, show me how you changed the law. What is your model to get 60 votes to make the changes to the law that President Trump identified as being needed on his watch? When he was president, he talked about asylum changes being necessary to have a logical, rational immigration system. I agree with him.
But, Bob, the clock is ticking so loud you can hear it resonate off the marble walls. The closer we get to congressional primaries and Election Day, the harder any big deal becomes. And Senate Republicans who are closely aligned with President Trump and former President Trump say this is just a non-starter for them, even when they do see this thing on paper.
Scott, stick with us. I want to come back to you in a moment. Margaret, you've been working the phones. Senator Graham, he's been close to the immigration issue for a long time. He says one thing, but what about Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell? What have you been hearing about his position on all of this and where it stands?
Well, when these headlines began breaking late yesterday, I began working the phones and talking to my sources who said, no, McConnell's message was never the talks are off. It was acknowledging the political reality of how much more difficult this will be in an election year when the presumed nominee, Donald Trump, wants to run on the issue of the border, but is incredibly unspecific in all of his messaging other than saying something needs to be done and saying that Joe Biden has failed. One of the things I thought was interesting from what Lindsey Graham said in that Scott interview, the most important thing, I would argue, since he is the one who will have to arguably deliver Donald Trump, since he is one of the 6 negotiators, Lindsey Graham said, I will say to Trump, if we can put this package together, you will have more tools to secure America when you are president. That's a sales pitch to Donald Trump. I'll make you a stronger president by giving new authorities to the current one, who he is arguing is on his way out. But one of the things that Donald Trump ran on in the last election, the one before that, and the current one is just the idea of the border. He did not actually change immigration law. What they're talking about now is not comprehensive immigration reform. This is not anything near the talks we had decades ago. These are significant changes, the most significant potentially in decades, but we're talking about restrictions on asylum, making it harder to classify yourself as having credible fear, a more intense interview process, essentially, speeding up the interview process with judges for your day in court for that to happen faster, and restricting parole. And it is parole that remains the sticking point in these talks. Senator Murphy, the Democratic negotiator, said that we'll know in the next 24 to 48 if you can close this. But from what I'm told, that the text is what they are working on here, that there already is actually like a broad agreement on the deal. The question is whether you can sell it to the conference, and then, of course, can you bring it to the floor in the House? When I went to Eagle Pass, Texas, with the Speaker, Mike Johnson, he told me he does want a deal. There's a moral imperative to get it done. The question is, can he get on board with what these compromise issues are?
Scott, could you answer Margaret's question based on your own reporting? What's the state of play right now among House Republicans as they look at this emerging deal?
Oh, this is such a startling contrast. You've got Trump's allies, including Lindsey Graham in the Senate, some of whom are trying to keep hope alive for this deal. Lindsey Graham saying, among other things, that he doesn't think this would impact the 2024 election, or have an adverse effect on Donald Trump. House Republicans, oh boy, they're saying something much different. They want the border as a vibrant campaign issue. Republicans worry they're about to lose the House. Republicans can taste getting the U.S. Senate control back, and the border issue they think is vibrant. But there have also been House Republicans who have said outwardly they don't want to give President Biden a victory. Troy Nehls of Texas, one of the most devoted Trump supporters in the U.S. House, said it in so many words. So what you have here is a long shot, potentially, getting something to navigate its way through the U.S. Senate in what would take weeks, not days, and then head to the U.S. House, where it's the ultimate 7-10 split. You've got a House Republican majority that may not want to put this on the floor, so they'd have to pass it, through going around, circumventing the House rules on immigration reform, on border security. That just seems far-fetched.
What's intriguing about this, Margaret, is we're not just having and covering a debate on immigration and border policy. There are other issues, especially on foreign policy and national security, that are intermingled with this whole conversation on Ukraine funding, on Israel. How are those issues and those discussions affecting what's happening on the border?
And that's the pushback against those critics in the Senate like Ted Cruz and Mike Lee, who are saying it's not time for a border deal, which is when the president of the United States, as he said, as he did last week, that no, the U.S. border is not secure and it hasn't been in decades. And Republicans are running on the fact that the border is not secure and it's a national security crisis. How do you then not do anything, including not provide funding to the border security agents who are there and saying, I need more men, I need more money? So that is a hard explanation to make to voters for both sides, I think, on that. In terms of unlocking the rest of the national security supplemental, it was Joe Biden who came out as president of the United States in Oval Office address and said, we have 4 huge national security crises, border being one of them. I'm asking Congress to act. It was Mike Johnson, the speaker, who said border and Ukraine have to be together, tied. But now it's all congested behind this one issue, and it just does not seem politically feasible from the sources I talked to uncouple them at this point. But I will say, there are some House Republicans who are very clearly saying they don't want movement on the border. But then you look at the Texas delegation, and there are plenty on it who do. You talk to Tony Gonzalez, you talk to Mike McCall. Those Texas Republicans are serious. They were in Mexico just days ago trying to get the Mexican government to do more because it's a backyard issue for them. So if you are in a border state, how do you go home and say that you didn't try to do something? So it's not quite clear that this is a Republican versus Democrat issue. It's actually much more complicated. And that's what I continue to hear from some of my sources saying, sure, there are people out there making a lot of noise, but let me tell you, I could get votes potentially to get this deal done. Or does this compromise deal that they come to in the Senate, if it doesn't move forward, do you come up with some new version, dress it up and call it a House version of that same bill? There are people who are not yet giving up on trying to get this done. But it is, as you know, Bob, in our CBS polling, the #2 issue for voters right after the economy. And you don't just see it as a Republican issue. This is a Democratic issue, too. People are concerned. And so the president is going to have to be talking about this as well. And it's complicated for him because he can't come out and fully give this a bear hug, right? Because if he does, then it draws the ire of Donald Trump. Joe Biden can't say this is my deal. And that's a difficult political sale as well.
So who closes this, Scott? I mean, there's so many players.
That's a great point.
You
and
Margaret have outlined so many players. I thought the Texas delegation point's a great one. But, Scott, who actually can come in if it's not the president, as Margaret said, who, for various reasons, politically and legislatively, may not want to weigh in that way? Who can close the deal, if anyone?
Let me tell you who could champion the deal, if not close it. How about the Biden district Republicans in the U.S. House, who are near major cities which have dealt with the bust-in migrant problem, and who want to have some resume, Bob, something to show in November for what they did over the past 2 years. And the critics of the House Republicans have said, what have you accomplished? What's your legacy? Among the critics, one of their own, Chip Roy of Texas. So those House moderates, they call themselves pragmatists, might be muscle to try to push their conference towards at least taking up this bill. But also, there are champions of Ukraine funding out there. I talked to one of them today, Tim Kaine of Virginia, who says if you separate these pieces, if you did, the votes are there for Ukraine if it gets on the floor. But for now, this is a sandwich that has been jammed together, immigration in Ukraine. And I got to tell you, Margaret and Bob, I still don't see how two very difficult things put together makes that single thing any easier. We're about to find out.
There's one of those DC sayings, right? If you have a big problem, what do you do to solve it? You make it even bigger, which only makes sense in Washington. And I feel like this is one of them. But I will just, Bob, on this point for Ukraine, one of the things that's being talked about in the Senate right now, and it has support in the House as well from people like French Hill of Arkansas. In the Senate, you'll see Senator Sheldon Whitehouse and Jim Risch in Senate Foreign Relations trying to get the authority in law to be able to seize $300 billion worth of Russian sovereign assets. That's Russian money, and it counts around the world, a lot of it in Europe. And to be able to put into the law that it's not just U.S. taxpayers helping Ukraine, but we're using the Russian money to fight the Russians, and giving Ukraine the authority to do that is significant. And that's one of the sweeteners that Democrats are eyeing that says maybe we can get more Republicans on board if we make the point Russian money is going to fund this fight as well. So watch that space.
This is old school Washington deal making going on. Everyone's trying to get their part of their agenda as part of this agreement. A lot to talk about, I'm sure, on Face the Nation on Sunday. Margaret Brennan and Scott MacFarlane, we really appreciate your reporting. And you can watch, Margaret, of course, on Face the Nation this Sunday on your CBS station and right here on CBS News Streaming.